Nice to see you all. I'm Sophia. Um, I'm a senior here in animation. Welcome to the storyboarding workshop. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's kind of like the intersection of animation and filmmaking. So if you're just interested in any kind of visual storytelling, this is the place for you. So what exactly is storyboarding? Well, like I said, it's a part drawing, part filmmaking. It's part of the pipeline. Typically comes after the script or any sort of story format, but before you actually start producing things. Um, on the right, you've got a little bit of Rian Johnson's storyboards for the film Knives Out. Just him doodling out his little ideas into thumbnails in order to visualize what the thing looks like before you actually start committing time, money, and resources to your final product. But typically, if you're working in animation and you're not Rian Johnson, then there's like a lot more that goes into it. If you're like a filmmaker that's really in charge of his own shit, then you kind of can do this for your storyboarding. But the most important thing is being able to communicate a vision and trying to convince whoever your director or story supervisor or even just like your audience that, hey, this is a thing that could exist. It's that in-between phase between your brain to the final product. And what exactly does that mean? According to Valerie Lapointe, who's a Pixar story artist do like kind of everybody's job before they do it. It's like the first stab at everything. It's like the actors, how are they communicating their lines? Like what are their body languages? How what are like the actions? If it's early on, what do the characters look like? Where are they in the scene? What props do they interact with? Where's the camera shooting from? How many shots do you need to get the story across? What is the lighting? Can you use shadow and light to like push the story? Do you have any like visual gags that you can do? So we're gonna cover some really basic film language in order to make this all make a little bit more sense. So you guys may have heard about the rule of thirds. It's kind of one of the more common principles of composition. The idea is that you divide up for any given frame into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and the intersection points are really good places to put like your focal point. That's like a hand if it's grabbing something, a face if you're doing conversation shots. You don't have to follow this exactly. One of the best examples of a really well-shot film that doesn't follow this is Mad Max Fury Road, which is kind of famous for having like really head-on shots. But kind of the idea of the suggestion of rule of thirds is that you don't want to place your action like way at the bottom. Most likely just a logistical thing. If you're, for example, your film is being shown on a plane where like the screen sizes are different, there's a chance that things are gonna get cut off, or just it's just not a super awesome place to like put anything that needs a lot of visual impact. I'm also going to use the terms like frame and shot kind of interchangeably. But frame, I guess, refers to more like this, a still image. You may have heard something about 24 frames per second. That's actually not the same thing as a shot. I'm gonna just for the I guess for the sake of this workshop, we're just gonna refer to it in the same way, because when I'm talking about a single shot, it's like where a camera focuses. The duration of an image, it's not static, but it's kind of like the film equivalent of a single image. A cut is wherever two shots are lined together. So if you have ever edited videos before, That's where one piece of video combines with another piece of video, and that intersection is going to be really, really important. We're also going to be talking about angles. That's just talking about where the camera is pointed. If anybody is like coming from more like the drawing animation side of things, it might be weird to start thinking about a camera, because when you draw, you can kind of just make anything happen, but it really, really does like improve your filmmaking decisions if you start thinking about a physical camera as if like you were filming a real life thing. The shot. How do you build it? What are all of your options? If when you put pen to paper, God, there's so many things that you could be drawing, and the white page is very daunting. On YouTube, there is a YouTube channel called Studio Binder. They have a playlist called the Shot List, which like extensively goes over shot sizes, compositions, angles, movements. In my opinion, it's a little bit too exhaustive. It goes like nobody really in practice needs to know the difference between a medium versus a medium close-up shot. Like when you're doing it, you just kind of do it. But they're a really great resource in trying to figure out, like say, for example, a close-up is really useful when you're trying to convey emotion. A full body shot is useful for when you need a character's full physicality. Establishing shot, really great for when you have a new environment or you need to show like who's in the scene in what position. If you're making a scene with a family in a kitchen, then it can be difficult to go right into the close-up shots of every single person without being all like, okay, where are we? What's the space? Who are the characters? And it makes a lot more sense. Like, have you ever seen an action film and then so much stuff is happening and it's all like these really quick little close-ups and you're all like, whoa, it feels like something cool is going on, but I have no idea where anybody is. Where are we? I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so it's really cool. It's really useful to think about like what are your options for how close are we to the characters. A good default is like the medium shot, which cuts off like above the character's head, maybe about at like their torso, because that's a little bit more realistic to how you see other people in a day-to-day life. Like if you're doing all extreme close-ups, it can be very stylistic, but it's kind of going to be disorienting for your audience. Composition. I think two of the most important compositional things to keep in mind are how many people are in your shot, keeping that very like purposeful. If you've got a group shot, then you want to make sure that you have some sort of good way to focus where the attention should be. That's a lot of people in one shot. Maybe your main character is like highlighted in some way, that they've got a little bit more of a direct light on them. Or maybe everybody in the shot is supposed to be equally anonymous, so you want to have them all like glance at like the bird flying across the screen in the same direction. We're also going to mention a lot the over the shoulder shot. It's very common. It's kind of what it sounds like. Imagine the camera over your shoulder, kind of just a little bit of your back is on screen, but then the main focus is whatever you're looking at. It's also related to the point of view shot, which, as you can imagine, is just it doesn't literally have to be a camera placed where somebody's face is, but the idea is that you are taking on a character's point of view, and that helps either to convey information or maybe convey some sort of like emotion. If you're in a character's point of view, you're more likely to sympathize with whatever journey they're going on right now. That relates onto like where you can place a camera, whether you want a high angle, a low angle, an overhead, floor level, eye level. Usually a low angle shot, you're going to see a lot when you want to emphasize some sort of scale. If you've got a character walking up to their job interview at a huge building and you want to show like, oh my God, that's a giant business building full of big business people, then a low angle shot can really like show the gravity of that. High angle can then make a character feel small. It's kind of like, who do you, if you think about it in a day-to-day life, most of the time if you're like looking down at somebody, you're in a place of like physical power over them usually. So that can make a character feel small within the frame. If you've got overhead, that's honestly one of my favorites stylistically because it's a little bit unnatural. But it's super great for stuff like Wes Anderson films where you want a more like storybook-like thing where people don't exactly look like people, they almost look more like figurines because it's such an unnatural angle. Floor level can be super awesome for like anything more tense. The vibe of it, I guess, is more so if you're like hiding under your bed. What's that going to convey? It's like maybe you only get to see people's feet, so you're like sneaking around a little bit. Maybe things are tense. Maybe the camera slips through the floorboards and shows somebody something or somebody underneath there. Movement. A lot of shots are pretty static. There's a concept of pushing in and out, usually to show some sort of new information. You can pan around, which is kind of like a swivel to often show space. You can tilt, which is kind of like a pan, but in a vertical motion that can often show scale. Basically, if you want to move your camera, think about how it reveals new information. Now, how do we stitch two shots together? Like you have an idea of being all like, oh, this character comes to their new school and here's how I'm gonna frame it and here's like why I'm gonna frame it that way. Awesome. Now we need to get to the next shot. The coolest shot effect is this idea in film that the interaction of any two shots in succession creates more meaning than a single shot in isolation. This means you can have a shot of a character's face and maybe there's an emotion on that face. Awesome. But if you show their face and then say an apple, then your brain, even if like these shots have nothing to do with each other, your brain creates an implication between these two. Maybe the character is looking at the apple or they're thinking about this apple. And that kind of blends into the most two common ways to connect shots. That's a shot reverse shot or the punch in and punch out. Shot reverse shot employs a lot of what I said before, the over the shoulder. It's got one person looking at a thing and then you cut over and it's the opposite point of view. It's most commonly used for if two people are in conversation. It doesn't even have to be two people, but if you think of a conversation, that's a really, really good way to frame a shot reverse shot. Imagine that like you're in the middle of a tennis court and you're watching this match go back and forth and you're looking from one person to the other, to the other, to the other. And that's kind of what a shot reverse shot does, that it gives you two sides of a story. These people don't even necessarily have to be talking. It can be maybe between a person and this photograph that they're looking at. But the idea is that you create some sort of like connection. This also relates to the 180 rule. You may have heard of that. The 180 rule is kind of this idea that you don't, if you've got two characters in a scene, you want to draw an imaginary line between them, and then you don't want your camera to exactly cross this line. So like the over-the-shoulder shots put you at a slight angle. It's not head on to the other person. And the effect of this is that you're not going to ever completely flip-flop between where the characters are. If you look at the Zootopia storyboards, you see Judy Hopps on the right. I forget, that's Idris Elba's character, but he's on the left. But then when you reverse cut, you see the perspective is shifted. So you're looking at his face, her back, but they're still occupying the same space within the frame. And it helps your eyes like keep up with what's going on. If you're constantly cutting and the character's here and then here and then here and they're looking here, but then they're looking there, that's just gonna really confuse people, and continuity is your friend. You can eventually like bend this the like where characters are in the frame rule, but say if Judy Hopps then walked over from screen right to screen left, like if you saw her do that and it's not just cameras shifting everywhere that's doing it, then like yeah, a character isn't going to remain on screen right for like the entire film. You've also got punch in, punch out. There's like a lot of different ways that you could frame, you could express the same idea, but the idea is that you have one shot facing a direction, and then another shot, the shot right after that facing the same direction, but either zoomed in or zoomed out, to whether give context to what's happening or to show more information or clarify it. So on the left here, you've got this Mrs. Otter talking to a police officer. Punch in, you see her facial expressions. You see a little bit more of the story. Really good for also like insert shots if you have like characters shuffling out of a room, but then, oh no, punch in, you see one of them is like sneaking a file off of the table. If you're not going to use either of these, the shot, reverse shot, or the punch in, punch out, it's usually for some sort of effect. Often you're like trying to doing an establishing shot to like show like a new scene, or you're doing a cutaway to like a different reaction, or alternatively showing a change in like circumstance, emotion, or like character dynamics. Or one of my favorites too, use it more sparingly, but there's also the idea of like the hero shot, something that shows like a giant explosion or like a really amazing fight sequence or this really beautiful set that you have. Like not every single shot is going to be like the most beautiful image you've ever seen, but using those a little bit more sparingly helps that stand out all the more. So the process. Storyboarding is like, depending on what your project is, it's a little bit of writing. You could just be given like a script and do it yourself. But honestly, especially a lot of students who are like into storyboarding, you're either translating like The Great Gatsby, like a story that already exists, or like Red Riding Hood. You're doing something like that and putting your twist on it. Or like you're coming up with your entirely own story, or you're like doing like an autobiography or something. The idea is that you start with some seed of an idea, and I would really, really recommend writing it out like actually in words physically, because then what you can do with that is like you can print it out, and in the margins you can start thumbnailing. You can start putting ideas for how these shots go. In terms of all the camera stuff that I've mentioned before, you don't have to do this, but I have found it to be such a useful idea, is making schematics for where are your characters moving in a scene, where's the camera gonna be. This is from a Twitter thread from the user Kathy Liu, where she breaks down this scene from The Incredibles. Dash is running one direction, runs out of these bugs. There are people chasing him. It's a very action-heavy scene, and she um, breaks down where the camera is in every single shot, so that like, because in this environment, technically, it's just trees. It's very, very easy to lose track of where a character is and what's going on. So breaking it down so that you have like a floor plan of what your idea is, it makes your storyboarding a lot more clear. Um, I also want, shoot, it's hidden here. Especially if you're storyboarding for yourself, you don't need to necessarily hold yourself to any artistic standard other than, does this communicate the story? That's the most important thing about artistic merit in terms of storyboarding, is can other people understand what's going on? I showed you guys that Rian Johnson of Storyboard earlier today, because for him as a filmmaker, that's all he needs. He's got his cinematographer, he has like a strong creative vision. That may be all he needs before he starts shooting. If you're like in Pixar, they probably demand something else. And if you're like doing TV, they probably demand something else. But if you're storyboarding your own short film, then maybe maybe you're Rian Johnson, maybe you need very, very little to actually get started. And it depends on what your needs are. But this is, I find, a really good example.
Hopefully by Friday. And then, okay, great, Kelsey, go. And so we all look up here at the screen, and then I pitch it. So we're on this sign. We see it says Frighten Elementary, and then we hear a kid off screen. Okay, everybody, line up. And we adjust over it. We see a bunch
Establishing shot. Now we know where we are.
of kids on a playground. Jablonski. This little kid runs forward. Touchburn. They're like picking teams. Another guy runs forward. Lee. Fielding. And then we hear this character off screen. Hey, excuse me, watch it. Move out of the way. Look out. Hey, hey. Pardon me, ma'am. Move it, slime ball. And then we see little tiny Mike Wazowski come up. Sorry, I'm late. So, whose team am I on? Forget it, Wazowski. This game is for scarers only. Gradenko. Ugh. I know. I'm going to be a scarer when I grow up. The scarers are the biggest, most terrifying monsters in the world. Emmett, this big kid next to him, oh, he runs back into line. Okay, we need one more. Rawr! Fine, you can play. Yes! Then Mike runs over to the group. Hey, you guys want to come up with a team song or maybe a cool team handshake? And we see this character off in the distance, rawr, 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 behind Mike there. And the kids kind of lean out. Hey, who's that? Mike turns around and we see rawr, a tiny little James Sullivan running and rawr, scaring birds as they're scattering off. He looks wild. I heard his dad was a real scarer. Oh, cool. Guys, the teams are full. We don't need anybody else. You're off the team, Wazowski. And they all whoa, run past him. What? And we see the kids run up to Sully. Hey, you want to play scaring? Sully turns around. Whoa, 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 whoa. You don't want this kid on your team. Besides, he was doing those moves all wrong. No, I wasn't. And Sully kind of comes down from the jungle gym. Listen, let me introduce myself. I'm Mike Wazowski, and you are? Jimmy Sullivan. James, I've read every scare book there is, and trust me, that move you just did, kind of looks back at the other kids, all wrong. His dad is a real scarer, Wazowski. Well, maybe his dad taught him wrong. No, he didn't. Oh, really? Then do you know the Johnson Pounce? Yeah, of course I do. Then let's see you do it. Whoa, boom, falls on his butt. That wasn't even close. Sully looks up. Sorry, kid. Just because your dad is a scarer doesn't get you on a scare team. Sully's gets up. Well, at least I'm not a shrimp. Ooh. Well, who are you calling shrimp, dummy? Who you calling dumb, shrimpy? Fight! Her, her. And then boom, we time cut to later, and Sully's got a little black eye. And we cut to Mike, he's got a big black eye. Listen, you two, we see they're in the principal's office. You're going to be in school together a long time. You could spend that time as friends, or you could spend it as enemies. What's it going to be? And the two of them look over at each other. And that's the end of the scene.
One thing you might have noticed from this clip though is that a lot of it is colored in grayscale. That's kind of like a step 2 for once you have the things sorted, like most of your stuff drawn out, but it can be really helpful for kind of those basic principles of making things stand out, of showing distance, of like I don't know, Mike being the only character still in white, the groups being all in gray shows them as one mass, stuff like that. But they're not like artistically required. It's not like if you submit a storyboard to somebody and it's not in grayscale, it's going to get rejected. But it is very helpful in communicating everything else we've talked about. Now I want to present like a little demo challenge to everybody of like, I don't know, 2 different types. Either you can like pick a movie scene, look it up, probably going to be able to find like clips on YouTube and just sketch them out as a storyboard format. Try to think of how you can reduce that scene and kind of reverse engineer to be like, okay, when the person it can be live action or animation. I think there's a lot to learn from both, but like be like, if I was a person working on this and I wanted to create a shot like this, what would I need? What kind of storyboard would I need to show the director in order to communicate the vision? Alternatively, I have a scenario that kind of like could flex people's writing muscles a little bit. Of 2 characters are at a restaurant, board a scene where character A delivers some bad news to character B. Like, are they cautious in trying to saying it? Are they very flippant? Are they breaking up? Is one of them dying? How do they react? Is it serious? Is it comedic? For an extra challenge, try to tell this like scene without any actual dialogue and just in images. Honestly, you can do this however you want. I really prefer doing thumbnails just on paper because it makes me a lot less precious with my drawings. Because for storyboarding, like with a lot of other art, the more iterations you can get out, the more different things you can try, the stronger you're gonna be.